أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وآله الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. I'd like to welcome all the brothers and sisters who are tuning in after quite a while. I was off for a few weeks, you can say maybe 3 weeks. We didn't have Shia Imamiyyah Doctrine sessions. Shaykh Mahdi, alhamdulillah, he did all of his sessions in the month of Ramadan, and he's done with his work. He was done with his work in the month. I had to take the second 2 weeks of Ramadan off for specific reasons. But alhamdulillah, we're back and doing what we were doing a few weeks ago, which is continuing our discussions on Shia Imamiyyah Doctrine and the Shia faith. My salams to those who are slowly trickling in and saying salam. I'm going to go over very quickly the what we covered last week. Now, there's a reason why I go over what we covered, not last week, last session, excuse me. There's a reason why I go over stuff that we've covered before, because usually, it helps to, put things into perspective and put things in context again, when we pick up where we left off. If you just start right away from zero miles an hour, just go boom, it sometimes it's hard for people to follow exactly where they were. So I go over very quickly some of the things that I've covered before in the previous session, just to make sure we're on the same page, because sometimes people who might be listening to these sessions consecutively, one after another, later on to the recordings, listening to the recordings and stuff, I might have to, when one recording finishes and they listen to the next one, it'll be repetitive for them. But usually people who are tuning in, they might have probably forgotten what we covered in previous sessions. And so that's why I go over what we've done very quickly. I'll try. So last session, we started with article 62 of this Shia Imamiyyah Doctrine book. Where we got was, it started with the infallibility of the prophets. And Ayatullah Subhani spoke about how there's different levels of infallibility. You have infallibility when it comes to receiving revelation, registering it, keep protecting it, and then transmitting it to the people. So that's one form of isma, or one level and grade of isma. Another level of isma, infallibility, is infallibility when it comes to sins and disobedience of God. That's also something that has to be discussed. So prophets, they will have infallibility when it comes to receiving revelation. 2, when it comes to obeying God. And 3, when it comes to making mistakes in everyday life. These are 3 levels of infallibility that are discussed in Shia theology and Islamic theology, let's say. It's not something that's peculiar to the Shia school necessarily. It will be discussed in other schools of thought as well. Now, sometimes all of these different levels of infallibility are not accepted by other schools of thought. Sometimes they are. And there's a 4th category or level of infallibility too. Usually, here he kind of, in the book, he makes it seem like that's also, in his eyes, a level, a form of infallibility. But we have to talk about that separately, and I did talk about it last session. So these 3 levels, he goes into each of them. Article 63 speaks about, the first one, which is infallibility when it comes to receiving revelation. He says, look, this is unanimously accepted. Everyone accepts the fact that, hey, if you're a prophet of God, you have to be infallible when it comes to receiving revelation, preserving it, and transmitting it to the people. You can't, make mistakes there. So that's one. Everyone unanimously accepts that. And he brings a verse of the Quran to prove that point as well. Number 2, although we don't need a verse of the Quran there, it is so clear, even common sense will tell you, if God is sending somebody with guidance, but can't provide guidance to that person properly so that they can transmit it to the people, then it's defeating the purpose of God. So that's one. Article 63 spoke about infallibility when it comes to obedience and disobedience of God. There, the mainstream Shia school, I stress, there will be some who might not believe in this, but mainstream Shia very strongly believes that prophets are going to be infallible even when it comes to obedience and disobedience of God and the commands of God, to the extent that he says here that even prophets, even before they become baligh, right, or even before, becoming prophet, they have to still be devoid of all sin and disobedience, which is an interesting point. What's the reason for that? He says because people won't take them seriously. Think about it. Someone's been sinning all his life, then he says, I'm a prophet now. Are people going to take him seriously? No, he says. So, as a result, that's what we believe in. Now, there are reservations regarding this reasoning. I'm not going to get into. I might have got into in the last session. It's not like these arguments are necessarily set in stone and hit the target 100%. Right? So, for example, this argument proves that, this person shouldn't have been a big regular sinner all their life before becoming prophet. But does it prove that one time, if he was alone and committed a sin, that's impossible? The reasoning said because people won't rely on them, won't have faith in them if this person was sinning. Well, what if no one knew that this person sinned once in their life? Still, people will follow him. So this reasoning might fall short of what he's trying to prove, it seems. The second thing he says here is that the reason why prophets have to be ma'soom and infallible even before becoming prophet is that other people will use their sins against them. If they were sinning before prophethood and then now they become prophet and then they say, hey, people, follow me. Others who are their enemies will say, well, are you going to follow someone who till yesterday was also sinning himself? Number 2. Number 3, it says that the reason for prophets being infallible even before becoming prophet is because it'll have more of an effect on the people in the people following them when it comes to guidance, when they see that someone themselves is a good role model. Okay. Once again, these are some of the reasons he brings for infallibility of prophets even before them becoming prophet. Brother is asking here, what's your view on the satanic verses? Is that fabricated? Who cares what my view is? We have to see what our great scholars say. But from what I remember, it's something that, of course, the Shia school will not accept at all. There were some verses, I forget from which surah they are, where it is said that these verses might have been revealed to the Holy Prophet by Shaitan, and the Holy Prophet thought that these are verses from God. But no, we as Shia, at least, I don't know about other schools of thought, but as Shia, we strongly disbelieve in such a thing. We don't believe in the fact that satanic verses were revealed to the Prophet, and that he mistakenly thought that those verses are verses from God and revelation from God. If I'm remembering the story correctly, of course. Hopefully I am. But that's not accepted in our school of thought. Article 64 talked about the last level of infallibility, which was not only are they infallible when it comes to receiving revelation and protecting it and transmitting it, 1. And 2, not only are they infallible when it comes to obedience and disobedience of God, but 3, they are also infallible for making mistakes, right? Mistakes where, for example, mistakes when it comes to judging amongst the people by the laws of God, okay? Now someone might say Prophet Dawood made a mistake, and so on and so forth. This is something we'll talk about later, okay? In general, not specifically about Prophet Dawood, but later on we'll talk a little bit about this idea of, but what about verses in the Quran that imply that prophets might have sinned, or not sinned, made mistakes. The list he lists here, one is like judging amongst people when it comes to cases of dispute, judging disputes. Number 2 is specification of the boundaries of religious rulings. For example, ascertaining whether a given liquid is alcoholic or not. Let's say there's a cup of a liquid in front of the Imam, and the Imam drinks it not knowing that there was alcohol in it. No, or a prophet, No, that's not the case. He says, mainstream Shia today believes that they won't make mistakes like that. If there's something like that in there, they won't accidentally drink it, for example. The domain of social principles, for example, specifying what contributes to public welfare and what corrupts it. Yeah, like let's say they come to a prophet and ask him about how to plant their date palms. Will the prophet know how to do that or not, or will he give them wrong guidance regarding that because he doesn't know how you're supposed to take care of your date palms? No, He won't make mistakes like that. That's what he's saying here. And other matters as well. So that's the third degree or third level of infallibility. The last degree and level of infallibility is that this prophet has to be devoid of anything that turns people away from him, repels them, turns them off. That's also something we talked about last time. This might not be widely accepted, but it makes sense to be accepted. If your reasoning for infallibility, one of the main points of it, is that so that if you're not infallible, people won't follow you to the T, then if you are in a way that, for example, you're always giving off a foul smell, will people be, inclined to come sit with you and ask you their questions and learn the faith and teachings of God from you? No, they won't. They'll be turned off by you. Let's say someone is so ugly. Can they be prophet? According to this reasoning, God can't do that because people won't be willing to go and sit down with that person, spend time with that person, and learn from that person. This is a fourth level of infallibility. He makes it sound like it is because that's how he starts off Article 65. He starts off by saying, one of the aspects of infallibility of the messengers is that there can be no element within their being that might serve as a source of repulsion for people. So he takes it as one of those levels of infallibility. I haven't seen others call it infallibility, but it makes sense that it would be discussed here rather than anywhere else. Okay, so that is what we covered in our last session. Let's move on now to today's session. Today's session, what we need to discuss a little bit, although we're not going to get into too much detail, Article 66 is about those verses in the Quran that speak about different prophets and the quote-unquote mistakes they made. Okay? And what we have there is that he says here that some things might in the beginning seem like it was disobedience of God, especially when you look at the wording of certain verses. وَعَصَى آدَمُ رَبَّهُ, for example, and Adam disobeyed his Lord, it says. Okay, so what's the first thing that comes to mind when you read this verse? Is that, okay, Prophet Adam there was a command regarding Prophet Adam disobeyed that command. That's what the wording looks like, That's what it seems like it's getting across to us and implying, is that Prophet Adam committed a sin. Prophet Dawood, Prophet Ibrahim's father, even that, we've talked about that before as well. Things like that, where the wording seems like there's a sin and it's attributed to a prophet somehow, directly, indirectly. All of these things, now that we have come to the conclusion as Shia, that if we've come to the conclusion that a prophet has to be infallible, we have no choice but to reinterpret and understand these verses in another way. Okay? So for example, if it says, وَعَصَى آدَمُ رَبَّهُ, that Prophet Adam disobeyed his Lord, disobeyed him in what? So here, ulama and scholars will explain that what Allah had commanded Prophet Adam wasn't a command in which, it's a legislative form of command, where if you listen to it, you're rewarded. If you don't listen to it, you're punished for it. This was more of an irshadi command, they call it. Irshadi command means a command that is not expected to necessarily be obeyed 100%. So I'll give you an example so that you can understand this a little better. For example, we have in our hadiths, I haven't seen this myself, one of my colleagues way back in the day, he was telling me this, that there's a hadith, someone comes to the Imam and tells him how he's feeling weak and he's not feeling better. The Imam tells him, you need to have some meat, right? Go have some meat. And so he goes and has meat and comes back, and then the Imam tells him, or he tells the Imam, I'm not feeling better. What does the Imam tell him? He says, how'd you make the meat? Well, he says, I made it in this way, I boiled it in water or something. The Imam tells him back, no. If you're going to go eat the meat, you have to actually grill it. Go grill your meat. Question, brothers and sisters. This command of the Imam right now, is it one of those legislative commands like pray, fast, stay away from this haram, that haram? Or no, is it just irshad? Irshad means trying to show them the best thing to do. Obviously it's the second. It's not like if that person had not had meat, then he committed a haram act. No. The Imam is saying, hey, this is my suggestion to you. This is what I think you should do. If he had not done it, still the Imam, it's not like he disobeyed the Imam and now he's a fasiq, he's a sinner, disobedient. Prophet Adam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, hey, if you eat from this fruit, فَتَكُونَ مِنَ الظَّالِمِينَ, you're going to hurt yourselves. It's to your own benefit. Why? Because if you have this fruit, for example, the implications of that will be that you will have to leave this place. And you don't want that. You're better off staying here. It wasn't one of those, this is what these scholars, they say it wasn't one of those commands that is necessarily has to be obeyed. I mean, this is even before, according to some, this is before he even came to to Earth itself. So before even coming here, there is no taklif to begin with. There is no duty to begin with. So for us to say that the commands there are binding. So they say, this is how they'll explain Prophet Adam. Prophet Adam. Now we have other prophets too that the Quran might speak about and might seem to imply, even our prophet, that might seem to imply that our prophet might have sinned, or other prophets might have sinned and disobeyed God. Each of these, just like the Prophet Adam example that I gave you, each of these different stories and cases of prophets will have its own dedicated explanation. Each case is different. For example, with our Holy Prophet, لِيَغْفِرَ اللَّهُ مَا تَقَدَّمَ مِنْ ذَنْبِكَ وَمَا تَأَخَّرَ. The Quran says, so that Allah may forgive the sins of yours, the ones that came before and the ones that are going to come later. Okay, sin here is referred to with the term dhanb. So dhanb usually is used for sinning, usually is used for disobedience, right? But in some cases it won't mean that. Dhanb comes from dhanab, if I'm not mistaken, which means tail, something that follows you, pursues you, might even haunt you. And so this story has to do with the conquest of Mecca, and where this verse was revealed then from in Surah Fath, I think. Yeah, إِنَّا فَتَحْنَا لَكَ فَتْحًا مُبِينًا لِيَغْفِرَ اللَّهُ مَا تَقَدَّمَ مِنْ ذَنْبِكَ وَمَا تَأَخَّرَ. So it's talking about that specific story where the Holy Prophet is conquering Mecca, and Allah says, through this, all the stuff that people had against you before and after are going to be wiped out. Something along those lines. I don't want to get into details once again. There are books that have been written on that let's say exonerate, although that's not a good word to use here, that exonerate these prophets of alleged sins, or implied sins, something like that. There are books that are written on these. There's a book that's written by Allama Sayyid Jafar al-Amili by the name of Bara'atu Adam. He has a book on the innocence, let's call it, of Prophet Adam. There are books on these topics. So you can't expect to cover each and every individual case separately. We can't have that. That's not going to happen in these concise sessions. And that's why what he says, Ayatullah Subhani, in the end of this article, number 66, he says, a detailed explanation of each of these verses is beyond the scope of the present book. Those who wish to investigate the matter further can consult the books referred to below. So then he gives a list of these books. Of course, they're in Arabic, most of them. Let me bring up this footnote real quick, or endnote. So, for example, the book of Tanzihul Anbiya by Sayyid Murtada. I don't think that's translated to English. Fakhruddin al-Razi, Ismatul Anbiya, another book. Mafahim al-Quran of Ayatullah Subhani, under the section of Isma. All of these different books, and other books, as I said, have been written to prove the innocence of the prophets when it came to obedience or disobedience of God. It's very, very important. Someone might say, okay, so what if they disobeyed God? If you believe they disobeyed God when it was wajib and necessary for them to obey God, but they just didn't, then that's going to hurt your theology. So you have to have answers for that. It's much more significant than it may seem to some. Okay, let's take some questions here. Can normal people become infallible? Is that even possible? Well, we believe that our prophets and the imams, our imams, they were all normal people, normal human beings. Allah favored them over others. Now we'll get to that part too. I'll talk about that later as well, about how God chooses these individuals. We need to talk about that a little bit. But yeah, they were normal people like you and I. Of course, if you want to go a little deeper in the Shia school of thought, you will find hadiths that mention how these were chosen individuals even before they were created. Their light existed and their nur was there. So you will have to reconcile what I said with that as well. But at the end of the day, they were normal human beings. But yeah, if your question is, can a normal Muhammad or Joe or Bob or somebody become prophet? No, it's not like that. There are a lot of conditions for a person becoming infallible, But if what you mean by your question is, can normal people be infallible in the sense of, can a non-prophet individual be infallible and not disobey God? The answer we'll get to in a little bit, okay? So just hang in there. Another question is mustahab comparable to, I think you mean irshadi commands. Can we call irshadi commands as mustahab? No. Legislative commands, those commands that have to do with the deen or the do's and don'ts of the deen, they usually divide them into 5. Wajib, haram, makruh, mustahab, mubah. These are all under the same category. It's not that mustahab, because it's not wajib, now it's irshadi. No, it's still part of the deen. And there is reward and punishment for it maybe. Right? Mustahab, there's reward for it. Makruh, there's no punishment for it, but for those people who want to, gain even more spirituality, once they've taken care of the wajib and haram, the next step is they take care of some of the makruhat and stay away from some of the makruhat. So those are all part of the do's and don'ts and legislations of Islam and the legal system of Islam. Those 5 types of commands. Now, those 5 are under the umbrella of tashri'i, legislative commands, versus irshadi commands. Right? Those tashri'i or ta'sisi commands or ta'abbudi commands, they might be referred to also. They stand against irshadi. Irshadi means it's not wajib, but not wajib because it's mustahab or mubah. But rather it's not wajib because it has to do with your daily life, things of, just normal life, things like that. Now I'm wording it like that. This is not a technical way of explaining it. Just so it's understandable, I'm using this terminology right now, or I'm using this wording. It has to do with stuff that, has nothing to do with religion. Oh, you're not feeling good? Okay, do this, Oh, you wanna make sure your sickness gets better? Do that, Hey, if you want to make sure you don't break your leg, don't jump off of a 3-foot, or 4-foot building or something, something like that. If an imam tells you or a prophet tells you, if you don't want to break your leg, don't jump off a 3-story building. That'll be an irshadi command. It's something that, even sometimes us with our common sense we would have been able to understand, right? Even if the imam had not told me, I would have still understood that. Even if the imam hadn't told me that, have this and that to feel better, today's science might have, proven the same thing, So these types of commands, they fall under that category of irshadi, just showing us the better way of things, Once again, I'm just trying to keep it as non-technical as possible, or else there are more technical ways of explaining this and discussing it. Okay. Another question is, what about this verse? O Prophet, why do you forbid that which Allah has made lawful to you, seeking to please your wives? And Allah is oft forgiving, most gracious. This verse seems to rectify the Holy Prophet. The Holy Prophet made a mistake here, and it seems like Allah is correcting him. What's your view on this? Man, this is a long topic, It's just like the other verses that talk about how the Prophet should not follow the mushrikeen. Like there's verses that, kind of are scolding the Prophet even as if, that do not follow them. If you follow the mushrikeen, we'll do this to you, we'll do that to you. It's not like the Prophet was necessarily going to do that. Right? There was a reason why God was addressing the Prophet in that situation in that way. As I said, each of these cases has its own explanation. What you're asking about, Brother Shuja, they say that the Holy Prophet, in order to keep, his wives happy, it's hard to keep everybody happy. This is one thing that everyone knows, and especially as an alim, you learn more and more the more you deal with people. It is almost impossible, if not impossible, and sometimes it's not even a good thing to keep everyone happy. So, the Holy Prophet was trying to, he's at least keep his, wives happy, and they just kept telling him, we don't want you to do this, we don't want you to do that. And so he would stop doing those things that he felt would make them upset. But it was getting out of hand. It was not very reasonable. And so the Quran says, "Oh Prophet, why are you depriving yourself of so much just to keep them happy? No, don't do that, So it's not like it was a mistake. It's just reminding the Prophet that, don't be too nice, maybe. Something like that. As I said, each of these verses will have its explanation. I'm just explaining off the top of my head. There might be more details that I've skipped, okay? But I hope I got the point across, that if you have a principle in theology, right, that principle will dictate how you understand certain verses. It's inevitable, okay? So for example, if the Quran says that Allah has a hand, and His hand is on top of everyone else's hand, or if a verse says that He's sitting on His throne, Allah is sitting on His throne, that what is meant by that, it must be something metaphorical. Why? Because our theology tells us, theological principles tell us that God just cannot have a physical hand. God is not physical, so He can't sit in a throne. That's an erroneous statement, right? So theology, your theology, and that's why theology is so important, and your belief system is so important, because it will, whether you like it or not, dictate how you understand a certain verse, or even how you understand a certain hadith, right? These are all, intertwined. That's why each of these stories that you're asking about will have its explanation, its dedicated explanation. The general answer is that no, it doesn't go against His infallibility because it wasn't a sin, or it wasn't a mistake. Sometimes God will scold His Prophet even, so that the people around the Prophet hear that scolding and they get scolded for what they've done. It wasn't even something the Prophet did. God speaks to His Prophet like that because if He speaks to the people like that, sometimes they just might let go of the entire religion and just go, right? And so, as I said, I keep repeating this, every case will be different. Okay, hopefully that answers your question to an extent. Let's move on to Article 67. This infallibility, the fact that a person will not disobey God, a prophet will not disobey God, it originates from two things. So let's read a little bit. It says the sources and foundations of isma, infallibility, can be summarized in the two following principles. That's where they come from. Infallibility comes from these two. The messengers and certain saints, it says here, certain awliya, the Farsi says. The reason why they're infallible is because they possess such a profound degree of ma'rifah and cognition and understanding. Here it says, and gnosis. And such a subtle mode of awareness of God that they would not exchange their contentment with God for anything else. They are not willing to exchange their God's satisfaction with anything. Why? Because they know what God is all about. When you fall in love with somebody, when you fall in love with someone because you know them so well, and you know that they're perfect, then what matters to you is for them to be happy, versus others being happy or not. If you have to choose between the satisfaction of your beloved and the satisfaction of some loser out there, you're going to pick your beloved over anyone else. Here, their cognition of God, he's saying, their cognition and understanding and ma'rifah of God is so high that all that matters to them is the satisfaction of God. So why would they put their own desires or others' desires over God's satisfaction? And that equals infallibility, he says. That is one of the sources of infallibility. One of the main supports for a person who has infallibility. Okay, in other words, their perception of the divine, of His bounty and majesty, is such that they cannot see anything apart from His reality. And they can entertain no thought apart from that of seeking the satisfaction of God. This station of gnosis is referred to in the following saying of Imam Ali, that he says, in I think Nahj al-Balagha, I have seen no thing without seeing God before it, after it, and along with it. Wow. So this shows that everything for Imam Ali is God. Why? Because he has such a high ma'rifah of God. So you tell me, is he going to ever go against God's satisfaction? Of course not. No matter what else what else's or whoever else's satisfaction he is able to attain. Okay, so that's one of the origins of infallibility. What's another origin? What's another source? Or what does infallibility stem from? What else does infallibility stem from? He says, number 2, the perfect awareness on the part of the messengers of the beatific or good, whatever you want to call it, the good and great consequences of obedience and the terrible retribution that follows disobedience. Such an awareness gives rise to their immunity from disobedience to God. Immunity here meaning them staying away from it no matter what. Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit. These people, what they have is, it's as if they're seeing, I'm not going to say they have or haven't, we don't want to get into that, but it's as if they're seeing the punishment that comes for a person who disobeys God. Okay, that's why they don't want to get close to it. Who in their right mind would want to put their finger or hand over some fire? Of course, no one's going to do that. Whoever knows what fire is won't do that. So these imams, these prophets, same thing with them. They know what it entails. Disobedience of God, it can entail eternal damnation if you continue on that path. So they don't even get close to it. Okay. He says, of course, infallibility. Okay, so now here he gets into something else, which is also important. Yeah. Let me just read off of it. Of course, infallibility in all its fullness is the exclusive preserve of the special saints of God. But in fact, some pious believers even are immune from the commission of sins in many spheres of their activity. This is the point I wanted to make. I said I'll make later. I've personally heard at least one of those scholars that's out there, one of those, great scholars. When I say scholar, I don't mean someone like me. I'm talking about great scholars. That they would say that, look, I've never disobeyed God in my life. Very simple. This person, now someone might say, oh my God, he's showing off and something like that. No, he's not showing off. He's reached the point where he doesn't care about anything except God. And he's letting everyone know that don't think it's impossible, I did it. Oh, you're trying to show off. When the guy is in love with God and he doesn't care what anyone else thinks, if he's going to tell you that I have never disobeyed God, you can be sure he's saying that even for the satisfaction of God because he feels like it's necessary to say it. Yeah. So a person like me might say, oh, he's trying to show off. But for him, no, it's not like that. He's just letting us know that it's possible. Now, here, Ayatullah Subhani is saying the same thing. Look, some people can reach a point where they don't disobey God anymore. This is just how it is. Sometimes, well, does that mean that they're a prophet now or not? We'll talk about later as well. But he says that yes. So this goes back to Brother Shuja's question in the beginning. Can normal people become infallible? If that's what you meant by it, Ayatollah Subhani is saying, yeah, normal people who are not prophets or imams can also reach a point where they're not sinning anymore because they've fallen in love with God so much. But I do want to say this here. Brothers and sisters, falling in love with God, this is what I'm just going to be transmitting what I've heard great scholars say. Falling in love with God goes like this apparently. And I don't want to sound like I'm a person like that too. We're all, struggling and trying our best, inshallah, to traverse this path of love of God. But how does it work? Well, a person will get familiar with God to an extent. Through what? Through the Quran, of course. Reading about the Akhirah, reading about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His traits, His characteristics, all of that. Reading all of that, slowly he will get an idea of what God is, how great God is, how unlimited God is, how perfect God is. Just a blurry image of that. As a result of that, and also he will develop fear of God as well. If God is going to be angry at me, oh my God, I better be careful. That's what you get out of Quran. That's why Quran is so important. It is what kicks everything off, really, for a person who wants to traverse the path of spiritual wayfaring. That's what gets you going. That's what gets the ball rolling. That's what gets the engine roaring. After you have that little blurry image, let's call it, for lack of better terms here, of God, you start acting according to His commands. Because of that little bit of knowledge that you had of God. Once you continue that, okay, this is wajib, I'm going to do it. This is haram, I'm going to stay away from it. Day in, day out, you try your best. When you fail, you do tawbah, get back up, try your best. If you continue that for a while, these ulama, they say slowly God Himself will give you a little bit more understanding of Him. So you can fall in love even more than just that blurry image that you had of Him. The more you gain cognition of Him, the more love you'll have of Him. The more love you have of Him, the more action you will have. And it just goes on like that. Until you stop acting, until you put aside righteous deeds, okay, then it'll stop. Righteous deeds meaning the wajibat. Righteous deeds meaning refraining from the harams out there. Those are the most important righteous deeds. Then after that, yeah, maybe some mustahabbat, some makruhat, but it's super important to understand the hierarchy. Wajib and haram, the hadiths tell us, if you're struggling with your with your wajib and haram, don't spend too much time on mustahab. Try to fix the wajib. So anyway, that's what the equation looks like. It starts with a blurry image through the Quran, through the example of the prophets and reading up on them. And then slowly acting upon that little bit of knowledge that you have. The hadith says, whoever acts upon what they know, God will give them knowledge of what they don't know. And slowly, slowly, more love comes. As more love comes, more action comes, and so on and so forth. Okay. Brother, you keep asking. So I said every story is going to be different, right, Brother Shuja? I said every story is going to be different. You keep asking about all of these different prophets. As I said, these are in books. This will take books to cover. So he's asking, what about Hazrat Musa killing someone by mistake? What about Hazrat Yunus being punished by Allah? What about Hazrat Sulaiman missing his prayers because he was distracted by his horses? Each of these, as I said, and now he says, I'm sorry, I love you. So each of these cases is different and has its own explanation. They're all in the tafsir books, rest assured. Each of them has its explanation. Okay? Maybe Mizan should do a course on that. I don't know. Okay, so that is regarding the origin of, and let's call it the water source of infallibility. A person is infallible, meaning they stay away from sin because of these two. It's super important to understand it's because of these two you're infallible, not because of anything else. It's because of these two that you don't get close to sin. It's important to understand that. Why? Because of this next article, Article 68. Article 68. If the origin of infallibility, the reason for someone being infallible, was anything other than the two things mentioned. 1, love of God and cognition of God. 2, knowledge of the grave circumstances of disobedience and sin. If it was anything other than this, like, it's God forcing this individual to be good and not be bad. If it was something like that, it goes against free will. And that is a big no-no. And I've said this before, I think on several occasions. Free will is one of the pillars of Islamic theology. And I'm not going to say Islamic theology, I'm going to say theology of all Semitic religions and Abrahamic faiths. Right? If you look into Christian theology, right, you will find this there. Free will is there. It is a pillar of our theology, brothers and sisters. If you take free will out, everything will crumble. If we are forced to do things, and we talked about this before, we've covered the articles that talk about predestination. If a person is forced to be good or bad, then Jannah and Jahannam are taken under question. God's justice goes, God's wisdom goes, a lot of things go out the window. And taklif and duty goes, as a result, commands of God go, everything goes out the window. So, as a result, when we say infallibility stems from these two, it's because if it stems from anything else, it might go against free will. And that is the last thing that you want. Going against free will is like putting a bullet in the head of Islamic theology and Abrahamic faith theology. So in Article 68, he says, it must be understood that there is no contradiction between infallibility and the free will of the infallible individual. Rather, an infallible person, despite having perfect consciousness of God and of the effects of disobedience and disobedience, still does have the power to commit a sin, even if he would never avail himself of this power. He would never use this power. And then he gives an example. He says it's like a father who has the power to kill his own child, but would never do so. Just because he's never going to do so doesn't mean, he's forced not to. No, at the end of the day, he can do whatever he wants. So this point, he drives home that infallibility and free will are not antithetical to each other, and rather they make perfect sense together. Okay, now someone might ask that you said infallible, we were talking about normal people being prophets or not, is it possible, and so on. And the answer was that normal people, in that sense, in a certain sense, no, they cannot be prophets. Prophets are chosen individuals. A million circumstances and conditions come together for someone to be able to be prophet. It's not like you can just randomly make someone prophet, okay? Now the question will come up, okay, so these prophets, you said they're infallible. We all know infallible means they're not going to disobey God. A person who doesn't disobey God, where do they belong? In hell or heaven? Well, they belong in heaven. And you said it doesn't go against their free will. That means they have actually deserved heaven. Question is, why didn't God give me that cognition of himself? Why didn't God give me that love of himself? Why didn't God give me that knowledge of the grave results of disobedience of God, and the fire that will come as a result of it, and so on. Right? Why didn't God give me that knowledge? If I had that knowledge, if I had that love and cognition of God, I would have also stayed away from sin too. So it's as if these prophets are getting a free pass. Yeah, that's what it seems like. And our youth sometimes ask this question. Brothers and sisters, as long as God hasn't taken anything away from you and I, if He wants to give stuff to others, that's perfectly fine. Okay, please pay attention to this example. There's a guy, he has $500. He has earned himself lawfully, legally, and it's his own money, his own possession. So what he does is, there's 3 guys that come, 3 of his friends, they're sitting one night together. This guy tells his 3 friends, he's like, hey, you guys, man, I love you guys so much. I just want to give you guys some money. Takes out the $500, right? So now each of these 3 guys thinks they're going to get a third of the 500. What does he end up doing? He gives 2 of them 100 and gives the last guy 300. Can any of them say, oh my God, that's not fair? That's the question. It's not fair. Is it not fair? Or is 300 not equal to 100? There's a difference between the two. It is true that 300 and 100 are not equal. So 2 of these guys got less than the 3rd guy. That's true. But can we call it unfair? Unfair is when this guy takes something from one of his 3 friends that he doesn't take away from the rest. But when it's giving, he gives 100 to one guy and 300 to another, the guy that got 100 can't say, oh my God, why'd you give him 300? That's not fair. You had to give us equally. He says, look, this is my own money. I give it to whoever I want. I could have given you nothing. And still you had no right to complain. Right? I could have given him all 500 and not given you any. And still I would have not done any injustice to you. It's my money. Come on. Right? So now that's an example. God has given infallibility to someone. Right? Let's just say He randomly gave it to them. Is that unfair for us now, having free will and guidance that He's sent our way, that we have now, and us having that opportunity to reach heaven, right? Let's just say randomly, I have to do this work, but they don't have to do this work. Is it unfair? The fact that He's going to give me eternity and infinity if I just take care of 50, 60, 70, 80 years of my life. What is 70 or 80 versus infinity? It's 0. It's nothing. So He's giving me such an opportunity. Good for me. and then he gives someone else something better. Let's just say we're just assuming that it was just a random giveaway type of thing. But with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there must be a reason that He gave to this one and gave less to that one. Made this one infallible, didn't make that one infallible. There must be something going on here. And that's what I want to say. I want to say that I personally, this is maybe my ignorance, I personally feel that it is one of the secrets of God, exactly why He's chosen a certain set of people to be prophets. I mean, there will be hadiths about this. There will be explanations about this by scholars, thinkers. But in the end, what was the 100% reason for Him choosing this person over that person? Really, God knows. Really, God knows. But at the end of the day, even if it was a random selection, it is God and who He wants to give it to. It's not like He told me, hey, to attain heaven, you have to be able to fly. Right? He didn't ask me for something I can't do. He says, I'll give you everything. All you need to do is give me 10, 15, 20 minutes a day of salat out of the 1440 minutes every day has. 60 times 24 is 1440. Out of 1440 minutes, give me 20 minutes of your time. I'll give you Jannah. Prayer takes 20 minutes all in all of them together for the people who are professionals and know how to do it a little fast. Maybe 40 minutes or an hour for the 5 salats for those who are not professionals, okay, in reading fast. So He's not asking for something impossible or even unreasonable in return for what? For Jannah. If anything, He has to say, it's not fair on me that you are getting everything. You're getting unlimited bliss for limited effort. Yeah? It makes sense for Him to say that. So all we know, brothers and sisters, is this, is that we are here right now in this world. We know that there are some prophets that were sent by God, chosen by God, whatever the reason was that they were chosen, not me. And that there's a path I have to traverse that they are showing me. That's what we know right now. And so as a result, we have to traverse this path. That's it. If we want ultimate felicity. Brother is asking, doesn't Dua Nudba mention how God chose the prophets? As I said, yes, there will be some hadiths, some du'as, some of these things, some even what scholars have even said, that will show us some of the reasons why God might have chosen certain individuals as prophets. Is it the 100% reason? Is it the full reason why? Why wasn't it this? Why wasn't it that? Prophet Harun, Prophet Musa, I don't know, this Imam, that Imam, so on. It's just a matter of, God. I think personally this is one of God's tests. One of God's tests for the people was to see if, when they say, how is it, the Quran talks about this, why is it that He was chosen from amongst us? Well, He was chosen at the end of the day. Right? God wants to see if you're going to listen now or not. That's the important part. These petty issues of I have to be chosen or else I'm not going to listen, stuff like that, He wants to see if we're going to put those aside for our own greater good or not. It's a test for people sometimes as well. But what's for sure is, some of the reasoning you can find in hadiths, you can find in du'as. We have in our hadiths, for example, even about Fatima Zahra, that God, before He even created her, He tested her and found her to be patient for everything that He was going to put her way. And as a result, He chose her to be Fatima Zahra. Yeah? We have these things as well. So in the end, we know that it's because of a certain thing they had. But the question is this. This is the part I want you to understand. Why did God give them that capacity and capability? That's the main question. Couldn't He give me that greatness, that knowledge, that understanding of God, so I can be a great person, you see? So for example, in Dua Nudba, or in other hadiths, for example, it'll say that He found them to be ready for the task. Well, what did they have that made them ready even before they were born? Couldn't I have that? Couldn't God give me that? The answer is, I think it's a secret. It's not something you can necessarily figure out. It's a test by God. What matters to us is that God didn't do injustice to us. And finally, we know that this is the path that we have to go. We have to follow these individuals. Yeah. I hope it's clear. There's a fine line between, it was a good question the brother asked, between what these hadiths say and what I'm trying to say here. The hadith say why people are prophets. What can you find in individuals as prophets that makes them so special, that makes them to have the capability of being prophet? That's one thing. The question that a youth is asking me and you though is this: why did they have that good stuff and I didn't upon birth, that allowed them to become prophets as a result of those good things? Inshallah it's clear. The final article we'll do today, and we're finished with this chapter, is article 69. It says that, look, we talked about infallibility and all that stuff, right? Remember that infallibility does not always equal prophethood. Okay? What is meant by that? It means that sometimes there will be righteous individuals out there who've reached a point where they're not going to disobey God. They're not going to sin God. I mean, come on. Who in their right mind believes or thinks that Lady Zainab alayhi salam, Abul Fadl Abbas alayhi salam, these types of individuals, are going to disobey God? Who in their right mind would say that? No one believes in that, right? But yet they're not referred to as ma'soom in a theological sense, right? Theological sense meaning that the infallibility that the prophets or the imams have. The imams, the prophets that are infallible in the theological sense, they have something special, which is the infallibility of prophethood, which is the infallibility of imamah. They have that type of infallibility. It comes from God. It's an endowment that comes from God that makes them infallible in the theological sense. There will be righteous individuals out there that have continued the path of God, and God has given them something special as a result of them doing what they needed to do. And yeah, they're not going to disobey God ever. But that does not mean that they're going to be prophets now necessarily. In the book, he gives the example of Lady Maryam, where the Quran says, Ya Maryam, inna Allah astafaki wa taharaki wa astafaki ala nisa'il alameen. O Maryam, we have chosen you and purified you and chosen you over all the women of the world, or the worlds. So here, taharaki, istafaki, you've been purified, you've been chosen. This word istafa is also used for prophets. Inna Allah istafa Adam wa Nuhan wa al Ibrahim wa al Imran ala al-alameen. That the Quran says we did istifa, we selected Adam, Nuh, the family of Ibrahim, the family of Imran over everyone else. It says istafa. The same word is used for Lady Maryam. Does that mean now since she's chosen and purified and she's never going to disobey God, does that mean that she's a prophet now? He says no. These two are not synonymous to each other. Infallible and prophet, being prophet, they're not. They're not going to be the same thing. You will have individuals that are righteous out there and will never disobey God, but they're not prophets at the end of the day. So, brother asks, Assalamu alaikum, is it possible the prophets showed through effort that they are capable of being prophets while others did not? See, this is where I say, this is one of those secrets of God. That's a good point you're pointing out. Some people say, before coming to this dunya, there was another life we had, and they proved themselves in that life. And that's why when they came to this life, they were prophets. That's not something that is necessarily accepted by everybody, that we had a life before this one. Yes, the Quran speaks about alam al-dhar, and a time where God told us, Alastu bi rabbikum qalu bala. But some scholars, or maybe even lots of commentators of the Quran, they kind of argue that this might be metaphorical of something else. That God is telling us, look, when you were born, I brought you to this world with the understanding that there is a God. I put it in your nature, I put it in your creation, I put it in your fitrah, they call it. Yeah? Some say that it's symbolizing that, okay? Or else it's just figurative speech. It's not to be taken literally that we had another life. Yeah, if we had another life, maybe them being chosen has to do with their effort there. At the end of the day though, the person who's asking this question, Brother Akbar who asked this question right now, the one who's asking, that youth that comes to me, he wants it to end somewhere where it was their effort and not just given by God. I personally think that's not going to be something that you can prove necessarily. That it was always because of their effort. They themselves in some hadith say that this is God-given. So that's where the question begs to be answered. If it's God-given, why was it not given to me? And why was it given to them? That's why I gave those answers that I gave. That first of all, it's not unfair. There is no injustice that was done to you as long as you have a fair chance at Jannah. 1. 2. God can give to whoever He wants. 3. God is all-wise, so there must be a reason and a secret that He chose this person and put something in them to be worthy of becoming prophet versus me. Then we can make some guesses. The hadiths have said some things as well. Putting all those together, you'll get a good idea of maybe what happened. But in the end, I personally think that there's something there that God just wants to test us with, really. Just like the rulings that we have in Islam, we don't understand the reason for all of them, but they're there. And certain things are wajib, certain things are haram. We know there must be a reason and wisdom behind it, but we won't encompass all of that. We won't be able to grasp every reason. So it's a test for us. God wants to see, will we listen to Him or not? Same thing. Same thing with the prophets and being chosen as well. Another question is it true that when Allah asked Shaitan to leave paradise because he refused to prostrate before Adam, Shaitan challenged God saying, I will misguide the mankind till the end of the world, but God replied, you will not be able to misguide my pious servants. And to that Shaitan said, I will indulge your pious people in the pride of their piousness and piety. That last part is not in the Quran. All it has in the Quran, it says, فَبِعِزَّتِكَ لَأُغْوِيَنَّهُمْ أَجْمَعِينَ إِلَّا عِبَادَكَ مِنْهُمُ الْمُخْلَصِينَ. The purified servants of yours, I cannot misguide. The rest, they will be misguided. That's all it says. It doesn't say, I will indulge your pious people in the pride of their piousness and piety. The verse doesn't say that, but sometimes, yes, even that is a tool that Shaitan does use. That's called ujb. Yeah, so brother asks, but aren't there a hadith about this? I remember reading a hadith about the Prophet stating that the reason he was chosen over all prophets is that he was the first one to say Bala. Exactly. So once again, those scholars who say that realm and the speech, that what is talking about that realm that we were in before this one, the ones who say those verses are metaphorical will also say that what the Prophet said here, I was the first one to say Bala, is also being metaphorical. What the Prophet means is that I am the best one, I am the one to best live up to the fact that God is the Lord. And since God knows that about him, God gave him prophethood. The question is, what makes the Prophet be the first one to say Bala? That's the question people will ask. And you have to have an answer to that. Right? So all of these hadiths, as I said again, I'll repeat again, as I said, the hadiths will mention certain things as the reason and all of that. And it sounds nice, but the question of why was it him, not me, the first one to say it, that's where the question is. How come I don't even remember that day? Some people will say. Yeah? As I said, there's a lot to discuss here. There's a lot of difference of opinion here, I will say as well. If you're able to resolve it for yourself, alhamdulillah. I'm not saying it can't be resolved. But even if someone can't find the proper answer that's convincing to them, all I want to say is this. We know where we are. We know where we're headed. We know how we're supposed to go where we're headed. So we have to follow the path of guidance provided to us by the chosen servants of Allah. If I can't figure out why they were chosen over me, if I can't figure out what they had, or why were they given what they had over me, it's fine. At the end of the day, it's a test of God. God is waiting to see if I listen to what He commands. Okay, so thank you very much. I think we're going to end here. It was a very lively and interactive session. Thanks for your questions, man. You're putting me in the hot seat. I like it. And I really like how you ask questions about these hadiths or verses of Quran. It shows that our brothers and sisters are reading these things. It's so important, so important. When you read these things, you have questions, then the questions come up, answers are given, you have time to go think about it. If you're convinced, you're convinced. If you're not, you come back again, back and forth until we figure it out. And then that's when Allah, inshallah, gifts us with guidance. Alright. Having said all of that, we end this chapter. Next week we will start with the next chapter regarding specific prophethood it's referred to. Till here we were talking about prophethood in general. Coming to the next chapter is going to be talking about our Holy Prophet in specific, right? And his miracle, which is the Holy Quran, and the details in that regard. Once again, I thank all of you for tuning in. Inshallah, keep us in your du'as. Until next week, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.